Muslim representation in board games, and the role of Jesus in Islam. On this episode of Board Game Faith, the bi-weekly podcast exploring the intersection of board games, spirituality, and religion. Today, with special guest, Ali Karar. Ali, welcome back to Board Game Faith.
Hi, it's very nice to see you all again and hear you back as well. For those who are just listening to the podcast version, it's very nice to be on this podcast. Again, I've been an avid listener. I was one of the first guests. Very honored to be that one. And it's very nice to be back, especially for a topic that I'm anxious to talk about.
Thank you, Ali. We are honored to have you back. I think you were our very first guest, and that was just such a meaningful, fun, important episode for us, and we're honored to have you back. Thanks for coming back. And by us, I mean not only me, but my intrepid and wonderful co-host.
Hello, everybody. Kevin Taylor here.
Kevin, it's good to see you too.
Same here.
How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good.
Good.
No complaints.
Good. Glad to hear it. Well, we were just talking a little bit before we went online, started recording this episode, that Ali just returned from a long trip. And Ali, would you mind sharing a little bit about that, please, with our listeners? Where have you been, and what did you get to do?
Well, I was in Pakistan, just meeting the parents, something equivalent to what you would be doing at Thanksgiving, meeting the families. And then, so it was for me, because majority of my family, including my parents, my relatives, my uncles, aunts, my in-laws, all live in Lahore, Pakistan. So I went there to actually meet them, see all of them, check up on their health, and of course have lots of food with them. So even though this has nothing to do with any particular date or something, but since I'm an expat in a different country, so that's kind of a typical thing that I have to do on a regular basis.
Sure. How often do you get to go back to Lahore? So
normally it used to be once a year, but now I'm making it slightly shorter than that, just because of the health of my parents. Sometimes I have to visit more frequently than that, but typically it's at least once a year.
Okay.
Minimum.
Okay. And you fly there from Saudi Arabia. How long of a flight is that? How long of a trip?
So the flight is 3 hours if I go from Saudi Arabia to Pakistan, and 4 hours if I come from Pakistan back to Saudi Arabia, just because the earth is round. Don't want to create a controversy, but that's how earth works, how it rotates. Sometimes the flight takes more because I'm trying to catch up with the rotation of the earth as well.
That makes sense. That's no controversies here. That's our next episode. Our next episode is the Earth really round? This episode of Board Game Faith. But this one, you're good.
So one of the funny things, I was just before the episode with Kevin. So I came just back this morning, and one of the reasons why we were recording late as well for this episode was because my flight was slightly disturbed as well. So I came back this morning, and one weird thing happened, which has never happened to me, that I got the same bag of mine, got custom clearance issues both in Pakistan as well as in Saudi Arabia. So I was astonished. So in Pakistan, I asked them that, okay, what's the issue? It was a small hand carry bag. What's the issue? Well, not hand carry. I was booking it in the luggage, but it was a small bag. What's the issue? Why are you asking me to get it checked, open it and get it checked? And they said, well, we cannot tell you, but get it checked. Okay. So I opened it. There were very few t-shirts and clothes, and board games in it.
Yes.
So they checked it, and then they said, okay, take it. So I said, okay, fine. I took it. Then I came to Saudi Arabia, and all my other luggage came except that one bag.
Interesting.
And then I said, oh, that bag is not coming. Because in Saudi Arabia, actually, they do all the inspection before they send the bag on the belt, on the conveyor belts. So you don't have to take it through any of the scanners or anything. If it comes on the belt, you can take it and just leave the airport. That's it. You're done. So that bag wasn't coming. So I thought, okay, there must be some issue with that bag again. It finally came, and the labels were marked with red tape and everything, red marker. So I picked up the bag. The security personnel, I tried to walk out, and the security personnel came and said, we need to get that bag checked. So please come with us.
Wow.
Fine. And in Saudi Arabia, that's a very scary situation because of the stricter laws. Anyway, I went. I was sure there was nothing inside.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went and I opened the bag. They checked it again through the scanner. So first they checked through the scanner and said, no, we still need to see it again. So they had put the red canine sticker on it, which meant it had been sniffed by the dogs as well, even.
Okay.
So I opened the bag, and then they checked, and again they found only some board games. 2 board games were there, and some t-shirt and nothing else. They tried to check every other thing, and then said, okay, fine, take it. So they didn't give any explanation. I asked them that, what was it? So that at least I know for future reason that I don't have to go through this kind of turmoil in the future. But they never said anything. So my only theory that why that might have happened, because one of the games was an unlock game box. So those people who might have seen an unlock game, the unlock games, now they come in a 3-game pack.
Yes.
So you open a box and there are 3 deck of cards in it. So I think when you scan it through a scanner, it seems like a bundle, because these are long tarot-shaped cards, but longer. These are long cards. So they thought maybe I'm laundering some money bundles or something.
Okay.
That's my only assumption, because there was nothing else in that bag which they could have seen in the x-ray as suspicious.
Yeah.
So maybe they thought I was sending, again, those money bundles through my luggage. And that's what they wanted to check. Once they had seen that inside the box, these were just colorful cards. They put it back in and told me to take them away.
That's so interesting. So maybe 1 deck of cards would have been okay, but this the fact that it looked like 3 things bundled together.
Bundles.
That makes sense. I bet you're right. And you've never had any problems like that before, like you said,
No.
going back and forth. Interesting.
Yeah, but
interesting.
Again, I never traveled with an unlocked game box before.
Okay.
What was the other game you brought?
It was Blackout Hong Kong.
Nice. When you go back, do you say, "Hey, mom and dad, here are some games. Could you play with me?" Do you ever play with your mom and dad?
Oh yeah. So
great.
on my last trip, we played Catan a lot.
Nice.
I wanted to introduce them or play with them more simple games. And this time, have you guys played My City?
No, but I want to.
I want to too, but I haven't.
Is it good?
So, it's a lovely game.
Nice.
Plus, the legacy element of it makes it so much more compelling that you can get many games out of it with just one simple rule addition. Every time you play, they just add one more rule. So when you start the game, it's just very bare bones. So I thought that, okay, playing with the parents, that might be the best way to do it, because to gamers, you can tell them 20 rules and they would just start following. They know the mechanisms. They know how tile placements work. They know how drafting works, X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But non-gamers don't work. Their brains don't work like that. So they can only comprehend few rules only at a time.
Yep.
So My City breaks that because its legacy campaign is set up in such a way that it will introduce you one rule at a time. You will play one game with it, and then it will slightly change a rule and you will play second game with it, slightly change a rule and you will play 3 games with it. And then it will introduce a big thing, a big change. So 3 games very similar, then a big change, 3 games similar, then a big change. So I played the whole legacy campaign with them. So they played with me 24 games.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
And they were surprised as well that they didn't expect to finish the whole campaign with me, but they were so invested in it that they finished it all with me.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get my city. That sounds, I mean, even more I want to get it now. That sounds really fun.
Yeah.
Especially what a nice endorsement for a kind of a way to ease it in for folks maybe who aren't necessarily as much into hobby board games. And because you're right, I think, if the more games you play, the more you just kind of internalize almost kind of intuitively how mechanisms work. You just get used to how game, and you don't have to, it's not like you're learning from scratch from every game again, whereas if you're new to the hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, they tend to shuffle different mechanisms. I mean, there's only so many mechanisms. So it's kind of a different version of something you've seen before in a different combination. So once you get some basics down, you start to see the patterns.
Yeah.
So that's great memory. Excellent, Ali. Well, we're so glad to have you back and curious. Give us some thoughts about representation in board games. That was actually something I think we wanted to discuss when you were previously on, and we just ran out of time. So I don't know. That's kind of not a very good segue.
Yeah, that's fine.
Here comes my slow pitch.
That's fine, because the more time we get to discuss the actual topic, that's better.
Good.
Now, for representation, let me ask you something, because then I will tell you that why maybe my opinion might be different. So, for example, when, let's say, a female or a black person says that they want to be better represented in board games or any kind of media, why do you think a black person, let's say, wants to be represented, that he sees a portrait of characters that you can select in a board game? Okay, these are the different characters that you can play. And most are white male, for example, in a game. Why do you think they want to select a black male? What's your opinion, Kevin or Daniel? Why do they want that?
I would imagine as human beings, we simply want to see people like ourselves. I think it's just a very basic human element.
Correct. But I'm actually going to say the opposite of it. And I will give you the long explanation, because that's the very, very simple explanation that anyone will give. That, for example, if we are talking about Muslim representation in board games or any kind of media, then many people will think that this is because, or any company, why would a company put a Muslim character in the board game or present in a board game? They might think that it will be good for marketing in that kind of market. So if they want to market more towards, again, more females, more black men, more XYZ, more any kind of community, more Spanish community, they have to have a representation from their portrait of characters so that they can feel a link to that story. That's the general consensus. But my point of view of representation is actually quite the opposite. My representation is that actually this gives a chance for someone else to understand you. That how do you feel? So by representation, what I want, not just the board game media, board game is, again, we are a board game podcast right now, but this applies to any kind of art or media form, that this representation has to be in all kind of media for Muslims, because it's going to, what I should say is that there have been different kind of portrayal or mindset or stereotyping that has been created for Muslims, and that needs to be broken. So, for example, the Muslims know what they are. They don't need to be reassured about that. It's actually the other community who have created stereotypes about Muslims. That's the stereotype that needs to be broken.
So what you're saying is it's not that we want to create characters or situations to encourage people like that to buy the game. We actually want people not like that, not represented, playing the game, so they understand other people
understand us
as human beings. Yes.
Correct.
Very interesting.
That is. That's fascinating.
Correct. And I will take two big controversies to give the explanation of that, because Muslims in the mainstream media, because the problem with the mainstream media is they always give the news about the bad things that are happening in a community and never the good things about what's happening in the community. So I will take the two examples of this, that they are not the true representation of what the Muslims are and how they became the stereotypical image of a Muslim. So for example, number one was the jihadist mindset. ISIS, Taliban, whatever. So whenever the Western media will see a Muslim, their mindset will go, oh, Muslims are like that. The reality is not all the Muslims are like that. That's a minority of the Muslims, not the majority of the Muslims. So who can change that mind? It's the media. The TV or the news is not doing that. The news is going to only show you either the very worst things that are happening. They will never show that. It's all the other media that needs to fix that stereotyping that's happening. Now, why has that mindset been created? What's the reality? Let me, through this podcast at least, some people should know that what's the reality behind that mindset, behind the jihadist mindset, for example. So, for example, if you take Quran, go to the very basic fundamental law, Quran. There are different ways you can distribute the Quran, and one of the easy ways to distribute Quran into two parts is that Quran was revealed in two different locations. We call them Makki chapters and Madani chapters. The Makki means those chapters which were revealed in Makkah, city of Makkah, and those chapters that were revealed in city of Medina. So Makkah, many people, again, who have not read the history, will think, oh, Makkah is the, again, stronghold of Muslims. But actually, that's exactly opposite. Makkah was a secular city where at the time when Islam started, paganship used to happen. There were idol worship. There were Muslims in a minority at that time. So Muhammad was a Meccan. It was his home city. He was born there. He lived there. But he was a minority in that city. And the Muslims were a minority. So all the chapters of Makkah used to teach about tolerance, used to teach about coexistence, used to teach about living together peacefully. Whereas if you take Medina chapters, those verses of Quran, Medina was the first Islamic state establishment. So majority were Muslims. All those chapters are that how the Muslim governorship should be done, how the rule of law according to Islam should be done in a land of Islam. So Quran has given us both the basis that for Muslims who are living in a Western world or a land which is not ruled by Muslims, how do you live in that? How do you coexist in that? Then use these guidelines. And if a land is ruled by Muslims, then what rules or laws you apply in them? Don't mix them together. You cannot enforce Islamic laws in a country which is trying to be secular or which is not a majority Muslim country. So if I go in the West, I have to live by their laws. then I have to learn to coexist with their laws. But if I'm living in a Muslim country, then I have to establish my own laws. That's two separate things. What they started to use, again, the extremist mindset, they started to apply the laws of Medina, which is, again, Islamic laws, on other countries, which is not allowed by Islam. Islam gave us two separate rule set. So you have to understand these things. These people don't come up with that knowledge, and again, they represented a minority who thought everything is applicable, what's written here, for every time. Because there is a verse in Quran which says the Christians are the best of the people for as friends of Muslims. This is a verse in Quran. But has anyone told that to the Christians, that this verse exists in Quran? That Christians are the best friends of Muslims. Because they are not arrogant. This is the actual verse. And at other location in Quran, there is also a verse which says, okay, go and kill the infidels. So what ISIS used is this verse. But they never gave the context that this verse actually came during the war. So when the war was happening and they were attacking the Muslims, so Muslims were on the defensive line. They were waiting for instructions what to do. So then the word of God was revealed that, okay, now you can go on the offensive. So they only picked that verse without any context and applied it for all their life. And that's how the extremist mindset was created, without the context. If you read the actual, again, you read slightly into the history of things or the detail of how this is set up, then you understand that, okay, Quran gave us both the guidelines. Quran told us to coexist with everyone. And when does it tell us to pick up a sword for the defense?
That's so fascinating.
So, and that is not made clear by anyone, but if that representation is done better, then maybe people will understand that, okay, this is. So if there is better representation in games, so for example, there are better representation, better themes in games about how the Ottoman Empire rose up, about, it said that, okay, because there is a very big contrast between how Jesus lived his life and how Prophet Muhammad lived his life. Again, Jesus said to show the other cheek while Muhammad picked up the sword. But Muhammad didn't pick up the sword on the first thing. He showed the cheek first, and there was a certain time when he picked up the sword. When the governance was established and they started suffocating him, they put sanctions on him, they stopped the food delivery to Muslims, they started lashing them out, they started burning them in the desert. When all these things started to happen, then they started to pick up sword. That, okay, now it's enough. Now we have enough power that we can actually start and show our force. When these things started, this is when, and these kind of conquest can be shown in games. There are many games built on, again, the European conquest, again, on many fictional conquests, but there are many themes which can be based on these actual conquests that were done. Ottoman Empire was nothing before. Ottomans were just simple tribes, small tribes, but slowly they rose into power, such a big, powerful, because of how they treated the people. They combined with them because of their good treatment to them. That's how they came into power. If they didn't treat the people good, they wouldn't have ever come into that kind of power. They protected against the Mongol Empire, the common man. Otherwise, no one would have supported them. So these kind of themes, these kind of representation can bring those stories back to the common man who have forgotten these stories or don't even know about these stories. And that's the representation.
That's so interesting. So you're saying that Muhammad goes to Mecca as an act of defense because the Muslims are being persecuted. Is that correct?
Correct.
I've never heard that. I always understood in
Yeah.
my limited knowledge that it was sort of because they were growing, they naturally, like an empire, started to conquer. But it was actually that was an act of self-defense. Very interesting.
Yeah, because Muhammad was a Meccan city resident. The first thing that was revealed to him was to save his life, leave the city. He went to Medina. From Mecca, he went to Medina. And in Medina, he was accepted. Everyone accepted Islam. And that became the first governance of Islam. Later on, to continue that, because they continue to again oppress the Muslims in Mecca, then for the defense, they went back to Mecca. But okay, you cannot continue this kind of oppression. And that's when he went back to Mecca. But initially, he was never asked even to raise a sword in Mecca. He was asked to leave Mecca to save his life.
I want to. This is so interesting, Ali. Yeah, I think like Kevin, these are things that I'm not aware of either. I want to ask you in a moment, if you can think of any games that maybe do a good job of this, or if not, like what you imagine a game would be that does a good job of this. Just to kind of give you time to think about it, just a couple reflections again on hearing you talk. I love that idea that you share of games being a way. Certainly games can be a way of representation in games can be a way of allowing people to see themselves in the games, and there's value and importance in that. But representation in games opening up an opportunity for us to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, and to come to understand a little bit better of another person's life and context and story. I think that's just so beautiful. It reminds me just a little bit of here in the United States. I have a friend who is who's African American and speaks a lot on issues of race and racism, and she has shared on a few different occasions that it's fine that she'll say, white people come to her and say, well, talk to us about race and racism and things like that. But she's also said at some points, it's really important for you people who are white just to get together and talk about these things too, and try to understand this, without appealing to a person of color and saying, well, tell us about, what this is like. In other words, like there is some responsibility on people to try to, there's a responsibility for empathy, sympathy, trying to understand the other. And it's not always the case. In fact, it's not the case, but it's the responsibility of the other to try to get us to understand them. That it's our responsibility to try to understand and have compassion and sympathy and empathy for the other person. And the other thing that you mentioned that just reminds me a lot of, this issue of like taking a verse out of context in the Quran, that just reminds me of so many conversations we have in Christian circles too, about taking a verse out of context and just really not even thinking about, where it came from or what's going on at the time, but still applying it, thinking that we can kind of apply it without thinking about surrounding it. Anyway, those are such valuable insights. Thanks for that you shared, Ali. Thank you. Do you think, have you seen games that you think kind of get this right a little bit, or if not, what do you think would help a game to get this right? Does anything come to mind related to that, or?
Well, I think games like I don't remember the exact name of the game, but there was a game similar to Pandemic, but opposite in role, which was regarding Moses, because Moses' story of Exodus is very similar to how Muhammad had to fled with all the Muslims through the land as well, and again to save themselves. That okay, if we cannot establish our own religion within the country of Pharaoh, then we might better leave the country to save our lives. That was one of the things. So the game actually used pandemic kind of system where there were cubes representing Pharaoh's soldiers, something like that. But I haven't played that game, so I'm not really sure, but I've seen the video or a review long back. Some of the mechanisms were a little wonky, but of course it can be matured up, and slowly you would reveal cards, and slowly the guards would come from city and slowly close in on the people who are trying to immigrate. Similar could be the theme of Freedom Underground Railroad, one of the famous games in which actually the black people had to go through the the freedom movement, had to leave the plantations and escape from the plantations. So those kind of mechanisms, co-op games, would be the best kind of things for these kind of games. When it comes to Ottoman era, then it can be competitive games even, where different players can be playing different kind of empires, whether it's the Constantinople empires, the Ottoman empires, and they are at war with each other. And that's also fine, as long as both teams are represented with their own motives, that what do they want to establish. So the coin-based games where they have their own set of objectives. So if you have played any kind of coin-based games, or even game like Root, where they have their own certain objective, rather than having symmetrical objectives, asymmetrical objectives, as long as they achieve those, then they are the winner. And those objectives give you the theme of what they actually intended to do. That there was the third army could be the Mongol Empire, which was a trouble for both of those empires. So again, those kind of themes, or Root kind of theme, could be applied to that as well. And it can be not only based on these big themes, it can start with smaller representation as well. One of the, as I said, that I will bring up those two controversial things. One, I've already talked about, the extremist jihadist mindset, that again, it has no basis. Majority of the Muslims don't even support that. The second controversy, which can be supported on much smaller scale in games, or just by characters or how they are portrayed in games, can be about the Iran issue, the Iran recent issue about the hijab. So, those who don't know, again, most people might have heard about it, that a girl was killed by the local ethnicity police, ethical police, whatever you want to call it, ethical police, because her hijab wasn't right, or her hair was appearing. Now, let me be clear. People think that this is being forced by Islam, and that's why this is being done. But that's wrong. That's the wrong impression. Islam gives a guideline of what a person should be doing, but nowhere Islam forces that a government can enforce this, or person should be prosecuted if they are not doing something. So Islam can recommend something. There are some mandatory things. So for example, the 5 prayers that you have to do in a day is a mandatory thing. You have to do it. But then there are some recommended things. There are mandatory things, some recommended things, and then some optional things. So there can be recommended and optional things, but it doesn't mean that you are mandatorily required to do them. No. The mandatory things, there are only 5. One is that you have to believe in one God, the Prophet Muhammad as the last prophet, and all the prophets before him. That includes Jesus. The second thing is the 5 prayers. Third thing is that you have to do the fasting for the month, 1 month of Ramadan. You can go beyond it, but month of Ramadan essential. You have to give 2.5% of your money to the poor. In Islam, that is a mandatory thing. No other religion says that. But in Islam, if you don't pay to the poor, you're no longer a Muslim.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in Christianity, we have this idea of giving to the church, which will give to the poor, but some of it stays at the church.
Yeah.
Correct? But for Islam, it has to go to the poor.
Often
not
a lot
the
of it
mosque.
stays at the church.
Yeah, a lot of it stays at the church.
Yeah.
So
I really admire
big distinction.
so much that expectation in Islam. That's about you have to give this percentage to the poor. Yeah.
And that's the minimum. Of course, you can go above that.
Yeah.
And the fifth is to perform the Hajj, which is only obligatory if you have the financial means. If you don't have the financial or health means, then of course it's not obligatory. So other than these five, these are called the 5 pillars of Islam. Other than these 5, everything else is either a recommendation or an optional thing. So if anyone is actually enforcing anything, then that's not part of Islam. Prophet Muhammad didn't enforce that. So a government might enforce it. It's someone's a personal decision. It's not out of Islam. So if a police is enforcing this, then don't take it as that, okay, Islam is forcing this. And that's giving a bad representation. And how it can be, that representation can be rectified is that, again, 2 female characters can be shown, both Muslim, one wearing a hijab and one wearing a decent dress without a hijab. And that's also fine. So people understand both are acceptable.
That's so helpful.
Because the other way is the France way, which is going to the other extreme. That is banning the hijab altogether. That is also an extreme. That you are banning and doing an ethnic cleansing kind of thing.
So what you're talking about, like giving Muslim communities and individuals just the choice of how they want to live this out, whether to wear the hijab or not.
How they want to look. Plus, for the Westerners, for the non-Muslims to see, Muslims can look in both ways. Don't think that if someone is wearing a hijab or not wearing a hijab, Muslims can still look either way. They should understand that as well, and they should accept that, okay, they can look both ways. It's up to a person's own level of belief. Let's bring that to, for example, board games. Sometimes in a month, you will buy a lot of board games, right? And sometimes in a month, you will not buy anything. You are not playing much board games. You are not buying much board games. Same goes with the level of belief as well. Sometimes you are feeling very high in your level of spirituality, and sometimes you are not feeling that much, and that's fine. That those levels go up and down. Human beings are like that. It doesn't mean that makes you less of a good person or more of a good person. People go through these phases. No one should be prosecuted based on that. But we need to be more accepting to that, okay, this is how life is.
That's so helpful. Thank you. I think I had heard recently, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. I may be mistaken on this, but I heard somewhere recently that the hijab itself isn't actually even directly from the Quran itself, isn't? Or it's or maybe it is, but it's a recommendation, but not a. Or do you know about? Is the hijab in the Quran at all, or how is that?
Actually, the word used in Quran is a different word, which means a covering, which covers the head and extends up to the neck. But what the Quran says is that extend it up to your front, up to the chest level. So the Quran uses an old Arabic word. That word is no longer used. That's why they use hijab. So many times actually people say, oh, even the word hijab doesn't exist in Quran. Actually, that's wrong, because hijab word didn't exist at that time.
I see. Okay.
It's a different word in Arabic. it just has been transformed into now what we understand as hijab. It's the same thing, but the description given is, again, the Arabs used to have a head cover on the head, but it used to come only up to the neck level. But what the Quran said was use that word and then said that extend that cloth up to your chest level. That's what the Quran referred. So if someone says hijab word is not there, yes, they are right, but technically they are not right because the explanation is there. Again, you have to just understand it better.
Thank you.
But
thank you.
Again, the second thing you mentioned, that it's only a recommendation. Yes, it's a recommendation. It's mentioned there that yes, this is what you should be wearing. But then also within the Quran, there is a verse which says there is no compulsion in religion. This is a general term given in Quran. So, which means that if something is becoming difficult for you, then don't do it. I'll tell you one of the stories from Prophet Muhammad's time. There was an apostle who came crying back to Prophet Muhammad and said that I have done the biggest fault against my belief, against my religion, because I've broken the first pillar. So the Quraysh, those were the people in the Makkah. Quraysh came to my house and they were beating my parents and they beat me as well, and they were going to kill me, and they said that accept that Allah is not the only God. Accept that, say that, and then we will leave you. Otherwise, we are going to kill you and your parents. So in front of them, I said that yes, Allah is not the only God. There are multiple gods. That's what I said in front of them. So Prophet Muhammad said, well, do you believe that? He said, no, of course I believe that Allah is the only true God. That's why I came running to you crying. So he said, if they come back to you again and do that same, you can say to them again that Allah is not the only true God.
Right.
Interesting.
So he
so
said
interesting.
there is no compulsion to save your life. If you have to, if you're being forced to say that, save your life. Saving your life is the most precious thing because Allah knows your true heart. That's
lovely.
what is meant by no compulsion in Islam. So if Allah can break his most fundamental pillar, then what about all the other rules to save your life?
Wow. Wow. This is so rich. This is so rich.
Right. Goodness.
Kevin, what are you thinking? I hear you.
I have so many thoughts that I don't know that I want to. They're so deep. I don't know. I'm not which way to move because I don't know. Because Ali's got me thinking so much. Context matters, especially for literary religions such as Islam and Christianity and Judaism, that we end up having to make sense of texts, that words, as Ali said, the word isn't used anymore, or it's changed, or we have to take it in context about, was it the part of the Quran from Mecca or from, I just blanked out.
From Medina. Yeah.
Medina, thank you. Sorry. Sinus head stuff. So we have to take it in context. And back to the topic of Christmas, my wife's uncle is a primitive Baptist, which is a very it's an odd, I shouldn't say odd, but it's an unusual offshoot. It's Calvinist Baptist. But he doesn't celebrate Christmas. And he said, well, celebrating Christmas isn't in the Bible. And he's right. Like, nowhere in the Bible does it tell you to celebrate Christmas. In fact, 2 of the Gospels don't record the birth of Jesus. So this is a contextual thing that not every Christian has to celebrate Christmas or have a Christmas tree, which isn't in the Bible or any of that. Like, context matters so much, as well as diversity, that some people love Christmas and some people don't celebrate it at all. And both are acceptable. It's not mandated that you have to have a Christmas tree.
Now, is Frosty the Snowman in the Bible? I think
he is. He is.
Okay. I thought so.
He was the angel of death in the book of Exodus. It made him very uncomfortable.
do not look into his button eyes.
Exactly. Poor Frosty. It was a very dark time for him. Yes. So that
it's a great
have you played
example,
Pax
Kevin.
Pamir, Ali?
No,
Pax
not
Pamir?
Pax Pamir. I know it's set in Afghanistan, but no, I haven't played it.
I love the game, and I got to play it with Daniel, actually, and he deals with the issue of colonialism because you are playing tribes, and you can switch allegiances to the various groups at work. So it makes you sympathize. As you were saying, you sort of sympathize for groups that are watching these imperial powers and playing off of them for their own interests. So it builds some of that sympathy, I think, because the British are ultimately just a tool, hopefully, for local tribes to achieve their own goals.
What I loved about that, Kevin, when we played it, and I'm interested in your thoughts too, Ali. It reminds me a little bit of what you were saying, Ali, earlier about it's the importance of valuing life and and keeping being alive, and no compulsion of religion. What I found interesting about that game was how, and I just barely got into it, a lot more than I do about it, Kevin. But if we think of the tribes in the game as kind of your family, there's your family unit. The most important thing is to keep your family unit alive, and safe and well. And it might mean at this point you're like, oh yeah, well, we're going to go with the British for a little while, or at this part we're going to go with the Russians a little while, or whatever. But the most important thing is preserving and keeping alive your people, the folks around you. Anyway, that may not be the message of the game at all, but that was kind of at least what I took from it.
It's interesting thing.
Say a little from the comment about the Christmas tree that you made, that you said what kind of Baptists they were?
He is a primitive Baptist, which is it's sort of Calvinist thinking from John Calvin, but they were Baptist in organization.
Yeah, because then you can consider that Muslims are part of that as well, because Prophet Muhammad, or what Muslims are taught, is also the same, that coming to the topic of Christmas, that we don't celebrate Christmas. We believe in Jesus Christ. We believe in his prophethood. But before going to that exact topic, let me talk about the similarity or the common thing between the two religions, especially when it comes to Christ. You will be surprised to know, many Christians don't know, that Muslims believe that Christ will be our Muslims' leader in the coming age. So what you call as the second coming of Christ, we believe he will be leading us. But we don't consider it as a second coming because we believe that he was never crucified. But he will be leading us. So when Christ comes, the Muslims will be following him. He will be the leader. So of course at that time, these forces will be joining at that time anyway. But coming back to the theory that we don't celebrate Christmas, because of course Christmas is not part of Bible or the religion, because again it came from winter solstice, had nothing to do with Christianity and XYZ. Again, I will not go into that detail. Let's talk about the actual things which make us common, which is Jesus Christ, which is the prophet in Islam. So the story of his birth is actually given in Quran in complete detail, which is exactly similar to, or pretty much similar to, what's given in the Bible as well. And there is a chapter in Quran, Surah Maryam, chapter Maryam, or Mary.
Yeah.
And she is the only female and the highest regarded female in Quran. The only female
did
and
not
the
know
highest
that.
regarded female in Quran. And all the event about her own birth, how she was in the temple, how she used to pray, how she used to be chaste, and everything is given in Quran in great detail. Now, one of the things you have to realize is that Quran, how it differentiates from Bible is that in Bible I've seen that there are long stories of prophets given in chronological order. Quran is not written like that. Quran is not set up like that. Quran used to come to give specific portions of the stories about specific instructions. When the emphasis of any instructions was to be given, then a story used to be told about that prophet, about a certain incident. So certain incidents of prophets, each and every prophet are given, but not the complete stories in chronological orders are given. So for example, I talked about the Exodus, Moses leaving the land of Pharaoh. That story came, but it came in the context of giving guidance to Muhammad that similar thing other prophets have done, now you must do the same. Similarly, about Noah and building of the ark, and how very poor people used to believe in Noah, and the rich people used to tell to him that, okay, if the poor people will stop believing in you, then we will start listening about your religion. But we don't want to be associated with the poor people. So tell them to leave your religion, then we will listen to you. That was the kind of statement that Noah people used to do. That's the part given in Quran, because how Prophet Muhammad started, very poor or lower community people started to believe on him. But the guidance was given that don't. The religion is for everyone. To accept someone big, don't push back the poor people who accepted the religion first. So anyway, coming back to the story, but Maryam's or Mary's story is given in a lot of detail to tell about how the story, and that story was told to Prophet Muhammad so that he is aware about when the Christians, because a lot of Christians used to be in Medina and they used to inquire about these things from him. So he could communicate with them and tell them that why he was part of the same legacy of prophets that used to come. Because Indian Muslims, that's why we believe that Abraham, we are part of the same religion of Abraham. Abraham had Ismail, and from Ishmael's family, Prophet Muhammad came. Whereas from Isaac's family, again, the Israel family came. So that's why that detailed encounter is given. The only difference in the birth is that when the angel Gabriel came to Mary and told her about that a child will be born to her. And she said that, okay, how will a child be born to me? Because I'm still a virgin. No man has ever touched me. So what he said was, because that is Allah's will. So the word used in Quran is kun fayakun. When Allah wills, it happens. So that is Allah's will. So what Muslims believe is that the birth of Jesus Christ was a consequence of God's word. What Christians believe is that Christ was God's word himself, but Muslims believe that Christ was a consequence of God's word, God's will. So it was God's will, and that's why Jesus Christ was born. And then all his miracles, they are explained, how he used to talk as a baby, how he defended the chastity of his mother, about how he cured diseased people, everything. The difference then comes the events of his death. Now, what Muslims believe for the death of Jesus Christ is, again, slightly more fascinating. Because what we believe is, and how Quran explains is, that the Jesus Christ was never given any kind of pain. Allah loved him too much, and what he did was that he was raised, and people were believed that they had crucified Jesus. So how this verse has been translated, that how would the people believe that he was crucified, was that Judas was actually the one people started to believe that Judas, when the Roman soldiers came, they saw Judas again, and they thought he was Jesus because Allah made him look like Christ. And it was Judas who was actually put on the cross. And that's why Muslims don't use the cross symbol, because we believe that it's actually the Judas on the cross.
I've never heard that. That's so interesting. Huh.
Yeah. So what we believe is, okay, so Judas was the one who was then forced to drag for his crime of betraying Jesus. He was forced to drag the cross across the desert, put on the cross, and he bled on the cross, whereas Jesus was hidden from the people at that time. Where hidden? Again, that detail is not given. But he was saved at that time.
Interesting.
That's why when it is believed that actually he was seen alive later in Bible, what Muslims believe, he was alive all the time. He was just hidden by God. He was asked by God to hide somewhere, and then he went. And one of the reasons why Allah has told in the Quran that he was asked to break bread and eat fish with the people after that, so that people can know that he was not a spirit at that time. He was still a man. He wasn't spirit. He didn't came alive back. He was still alive. He was still the same man. And that's why he ate those things in front of the people. But after that, he said, okay, now my mission is over and someone else will come to guide you. And then he left off. This is where Allah raised him to the heavens. And he has still not died. Now his spirit has been raised. And he will be sent down again close to the judgment day to lead against the Antichrist. So that is the Muslim belief. That's where the story differs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Thank you, Ali.
So Muhammad is the most important of the prophets because he was the last. But is it fair to say Jesus is the second most important because he has this special role? Or is that not fair for Islam?
Islam actually states that, of course, Prophet Muhammad was the last prophet. We give respect to all the prophets. So, for example, let me be fair in saying, you might have heard about the controversies about Prophet Muhammad's sketches, for example. We feel same kind of pain, same kind of disturbance for any kind of prophet. We give the same kind of value to every prophet. The only difference is we don't believe that the person on the cross is the Christ. Otherwise, we would feel that pain as well. But we give the same respect to every prophet because these were all prophets of the same religion. We still believe Moses spread the same religion. Whether you call it Islam, whether you call it religion of God, the name of the religion doesn't matter. It's the religion of God. We believe it was the same religion. So they were Muslims of that time. Those who believed Christ were Muslims of that time. So we believe in the same prophet and we respect all the prophets. So we respect Noah and Moses and Jesus and prophet all the same. The only importance Muhammad additionally has is that he completed the religion by bringing the last final book, because at that time in Jesus' message, he did mention that now someone else will come and guide you. But in Quran, the message was revealed that now the religion has been completed.
Okay.
That's interesting.
So then we understand that now there is no more prophets are going to come. Now this book is the final version, because even when Jesus came, he did not disregard the laws of Moses. He used the laws of Moses and said he will add on to them, or he will modify them. That's what he did. So the previous laws still remained. And that's why the Old Testament and New Testament still remains.
In Islam, are there certain general themes that are associated with the teachings of Jesus as prophet? Like, is there kind of a shorthand way of saying, oh, this prophet taught us especially about this, or this prophet taught us about this, or is there anything like that related to the view of Jesus?
Of course, we have the different miracles of each prophet and the different teachings of each prophet. As I said, that every prophet's story came in Quran to teach us about something very specific, about the specific nature and specific learnings from that story. That what do we need to learn from that story? So Jesus' story was the same as well. That how he needed, Jesus' story was important about how Prophet Muhammad needed to establish his team of apostles. That how he needed to care about the community, how he needed to establish that community factor within that team of his, so that they can then spread the message across later on, once he's gone. Because now he's going to be the last one. No one is going to come after him. Now someone else needs to carry that forward. Prophet Muhammad said that the best apostles that were given were to me. So, and if we see any other prophet's story, we will not be able to name any apostle of any other prophet other than Jesus or Prophet Muhammad. So from each prophet, Prophet Muhammad learned something, because these stories taught Prophet Muhammad something. Allah revealed these stories to him, that these prophets came before you and this is what you need to learn from it. These are your lesson learned. Now improve upon it. And his improvement, to me, my understanding is that from Jesus, of course, miracles are unique for each prophet. And other than his miracles, those miracles will not be repeated. What needs to continue is those apostles. Those were the miracle of his, that without those miracles, now those apostles will continue forever and ever.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for helping us understand and get some ideas from a Muslim about what Islam's about. That's not something that sadly we always get the opportunity to do. So thank you for that. Any particular games you're playing, or the transition things you're interested in?
I just finished, I think, because I just finished the My City Legacy campaign with my parents. So I hope to start Mice and Mystics most probably with my family now. I got its copy. Actually, I played the second part of it. It's called Aftermath. It's not very well known. Mice and Mystics is very well known. But after Mice and Mystics, Jerry Hawthorne did another game called Aftermath, which was also with rodents and set in an apocalyptic kind of setting. But it wasn't very famous, but I played it. I really enjoyed it. So this time around, I thought I really enjoyed that. I thought I will go back and try Mice and Mystics. So most probably I will try that one out.
Cool. Good.
Anything you're doing, Daniel? What game are you messing with these days?
Thanks. Last night, actually, I broke back out my copy of Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. Mm-hmm. And which is kind of a scaled down version of the bigger Terraforming Mars, and different rule set as well, action selection, things like that. I really like that game. I've played it primarily solo mode. It's got a good solo mode on it. I love it. It's really fun. I find it really hard if the future terraforming of Mars depends on me, we're all in trouble, because I've never successfully terraformed Mars, but it's a lot of fun. But always the planet dies because I can never get the temperature and oxygen and water levels up high enough.
So
but it's still fun.
You're only playing it solo or with family?
I'm just doing that one solo. Actually, though Kristen, my wife, last night saw me play and she said, I think I'd really like that, and I think she would. It's her kind of game. We both love Roll for the Galaxy, which has a similar mechanism of action activation that we can both take. So I think she'd really like it, but we just haven't tried it yet together. So it's only been solo so far.
Because I had the bigger version as well, and I just sold it off after Ares Expedition because it was slightly much faster, less table hog, and of course better artwork. So I love Ares Expedition, and well, my story mode is available as well in case you want to play the multiplayer mode.
Great, I'm glad you said that. Thank you. And where can people find that?
So it's available at http://bit.ly/karar KARAR story mode STORYMODE bit.ly/karar story mode.
Okay,
Great.
We'll put
Thank
a
you.
link in the description below. Yes.
Yeah.
So
and that's I'm so glad you said that, Ali. Thank you. And Kevin, how about you? Games you've been playing? Any game you've been cracking into?
I got obsessed with this Wayfarers of the South Tigris. That is something. It's from again Garfield Games, and it's sort of a set collection. Your explorers from, I believe it's from the 10th century Iraq. You're going along and you're trying to create a map. And so you can go out to land. It's sort of set collection, but it's a lot of interesting things going on.
Neat.
So yeah,
I know you've been talking a lot about that. It sounds like you really enjoy it.
Yeah, I get kind of I mostly solo, but yeah, it just makes me mad. So then I play it again. Just one more star, one more vista.
Well, I'm very hopeful for South Tigris because that theme is set in the region of Baghdad, and in the upcoming episodes, not the episodes, the upcoming series of that game, what they have announced, I'm actually hopeful because one of the games, I don't remember the names of all of them because they announced 3 games at the same time. I think it's the second game in which actually you have to collect books. So that's actually based on the true historical fact of how Muslims collected knowledge from across the world, because Baghdad used to be the knowledge hub at that time. And what they used to do was they used to weigh knowledge and pay in terms of weight. How much knowledge, books that you can collect, scrolls you can collect, they would write it down, weight, and pay in gold you that weight.
Really? That's so interesting.
To entice people that bring us any kind of knowledge you can. Wow. And we will pay you in gold. So people thought, okay, poems, stories, whatever knowledge we have, Greek history, whatever. They said, whatever, bring us that knowledge. we want to collect knowledge, and that's how they collected the knowledge. And
so
that was one of
fascinating.
the biggest libraries. So again, people talk about library of, for example, Alexandria. This was actually bigger than that. But again, during Mongol invasion, all that knowledge was lost because Mongols put it all on fire and threw it in the water. So all that knowledge was lost. But again, a lot of innovation was done during that time. Because if you see Muslim scholars, again, a lot of themes can be worked on. The majority of the medical equipment were invented by the Muslim scientists. Telescope, algebra, chemistry, all these things were invented by the Muslim scientists of those era. Later, Europe actually took these things from Muslim scientists and then worked on them. The sad things, after the Mongols raided, Muslims were left with nothing, so the knowledge was in Europe, and then they kept working on it while nothing was left with the Muslims. So all that history, even people don't forget, many people think the first flight was taken by the Wright brothers. But if you check the actual
North
history,
Carolina.
the first person who flew with wings, even before Leonardo, was a Muslim scientist who
Really?
flew with wings. Well, he broke his backbone, but in his experiments. But
Oh, no.
he gave that concept that with wings,
Interesting.
that leviation can be done.
Interesting.
Right.
Interesting.
So again, a lot of these themes, representation can be done to make people aware where all of this came from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, Muslims have a lot to offer other than extremism.
There is extremism everywhere. So
Yeah, absolutely. And
yes,
yep, for sure.
yes.
Well, this has been great. I wish we'd keep talking, but I know we've reached our
Yes,
usual
we
episode
probably
limit.
should come to a conclusion. But thank you so much, Ali, and we will put links to your work on YouTube and Story Mode and other contributions below. And you're generally Karar 2K on those platforms, correct?
Yes.
KARAR, the number 2.
Number 2.
And then K. Number 2 and then K.
On YouTube and Instagram. Yes.
Yeah, no, I thank you for me too, Ali. I didn't realize, I guess, until you mentioned it, that you just flew in, you just got back today, and just get back today and record this episode is so gracious of you.
He actually used that original invention to fly, and his arms are
He
very tired right now.
And no broken back on the way.
Broken back.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad it's been improved. Good,
Yes,
good.
yes.
And no, it's been great, Ali. You know, you began the episode by talking about the importance of representation to help us understand each other, and from different places, different circumstances, different backgrounds. And I think you have embodied that so well this episode for listeners who may not be Muslim. You've really you have embodied what you talked about. So thank you so much. We're really grateful for you and for your taking time to share with us today.
Yeah, it was
Right.
great talking to you, and upcoming season greetings to you as well. Whatever you celebrate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Because, again,
Sure.
everyone has the right to celebrate whatever they believe in. That's what coexistence is all about. We have to
Amen.
be happy, and we hope we get to play a lot of games during that time as well.
That's what unites us all.
That's right.
I love it. And speaking of which, next episode, Kevin, I didn't get to double check with you on this. I hope it's okay. Next episode, we're going to be talking about how to some thoughts on how to start board game groups in places of worship. That's something we hear a fair amount of questions about. How do I start a board game group in my place of worship, in my house of worship? We're going to be talking about that next time, and hope you can be present for that. But in the meantime, Kevin, how can people find us? And again, if anything else from you, Ali, on how people can find you. But Kevin, how about Board Game Faith?
Yeah, we're Board Game Faith on most all platforms, Instagram and on YouTube and Facebook, and info@boardgamefaith.com if you want to shoot us an email. And there's Linktree. Remind me the Linktree address.
Yeah, it's Linktree, which is linktr.ee/boardgamefaith. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. And we got a newsletter too. And Ali, again, how can people find you?
Well, they can find me on Instagram and YouTube. My handle is Karar2K, Karar, number 2K. So Karar2K on Instagram and YouTube, you can find me there. And of course, all the links are given there as well. So that's where you will find me.
Excellent. Okay. Well, a happy new year and happy holidays to everybody. And we'll see you in 2023. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.